On September 17, 1944, the Western Allies launched the largest airborne operation attempted so far in the war. More than 34,000 airborne troops were committed to the opening phase. They were carried by roughly 1,500 transport aircraft and over 500 gliders, covered by overwhelming Allied air power. Their mission was simple to describe and extraordinarily difficult to execute. Land deep inside the occupied Netherlands, seize a chain of bridges, and open a road for an armored thrust toward Germany. If it worked, the Allies might cross the great Dutch rivers, outflank German defenses, and force open a path toward the Ruhr. If it failed, thousands of men would be left isolated far beyond immediate support. That operation was Market Garden. And from the very beginning, it was built on one breathtaking assumption: that speed could solve almost everything. To understand why Market Garden was launched, you have to understand the mood of early September 1944. The Allied breakout from Normandy had transformed the war in the West. After weeks of slow, brutal fighting in the hedgerows, the German front in France had broken apart. Paris was liberated on August 25, 1944. German formations were retreating eastward. Across France and Belgium, Allied columns were moving with a speed that had seemed impossible only a few weeks earlier. To many commanders, this looked like opportunity. But victory had created a new problem. The Allies were advancing faster than their logistics system was designed to support. Fuel had to come forward from the Normandy beaches over long distances. Ammunition, spare parts, food, engineers, bridging equipment, and medical support all had to keep up with armies moving rapidly across damaged infrastructure. Roads were overcrowded. Vehicles wore out. Ports remained a major issue. Although Antwerp had been captured on September 4th, it could not yet be fully used, because the Scheldt estuary was still in German hands. That is one of the most important realities behind Market Garden. The Allies were winning, but they were also stretching. And that created a dangerous question at the top of command. Should they slow down and rebuild the supply situation? Or should they take one more major risk while Germany still looked unsteady? Market Garden was the answer chosen by those who believed the moment still belonged to the Allies. The strongest advocate for that risk was Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery. Montgomery argued against a broad, even advance across the whole front. Instead, he wanted a concentrated thrust through the Netherlands. The concept was bold: use airborne forces to seize key bridges in depth, then send a powerful ground force north to link up with them in sequence. The geography made this attractive. The Netherlands was cut by major rivers, the Meuse, the Waal, and the Lower Rhine among them. These waterways were natural defensive barriers. If the Allies could cross them quickly, they might break into northern Germany before the Wehrmacht had time to stabilize. The final and most important objective was Arnhem. If Arnhem could be taken and held, the Allies might secure a crossing over the Lower Rhine and threaten the Ruhr, one of Germany's most important industrial regions. That was the promise behind the operation. Not just more advance, not just more liberated ground, but the possibility of a decisive turn in the campaign. That is what made Market Garden so tempting. It was not an absurd fantasy. It was a serious gamble built around a real opportunity. But it was a gamble all the same. The operation was divided into two parts. Operation Market was the airborne assault. Operation Garden was the ground advance. On the airborne side, the Allies committed three major formations in the opening phase. The U.S. 101st Airborne Division would land around Eindhoven and secure bridges in the southern sector. The U.S. 82nd Airborne Division would land around Grave and Nijmegen, where it had to secure the Long Moss Bridge at Grave, the approaches to Nijmegen, and key high ground near Groesbeek. The British 1st Airborne Division, later joined in part by the Polish 1st Independent Parachute Brigade, would land near Arnhem and capture the final bridge over the Lower Rhine. On the ground, the main striking force was British XXX Corps, led by Lieutenant General Brian Horrocks. Its spearhead included the Guards Armored Division, supported by infantry, engineers, artillery, and follow-on formations. Altogether, the broader operation involved around 90,000 Allied troops, though not all entered combat at the same moment. The opening airborne lifts alone used more than 1,500 transport aircraft and over 500 gliders. That scale matters. Market Garden was not a raid. It was not a local attack. It was a full-scale operational gamble. The numbers behind the operation were impressive, and they help explain why so many believed it might work. On September 17, 1944, the first lift brought in well over 20,000 airborne troops in a single day. More waves would follow. The Allies committed hundreds of C-47 transport aircraft, large numbers of Horsa and Waco gliders, and massive fighter support overhead. Against that, the Germans did not begin with one neat front line prepared in advance. In many places, they had security troops, training elements, scattered battle groups, and improvised response units. But the situation near Arnhem was more dangerous than the Allies wanted to admit. Nearby were elements of the 9th SS Panzer Division Hohenstaufen and 10th SS Panzer Division Frundsberg. These divisions had been battered in Normandy, but they were still dangerous. They had armored vehicles, experienced officers, and enough cohesion to react quickly once the scale of the attack became clear. That fact did not make Allied success impossible, but it meant the operation depended even more heavily on speed. And speed was exactly what the plan could least afford to lose. One of the most revealing images of Market Garden is the long British column moving north along a single raised road through the Dutch countryside. That road was the spine of the operation. From the Belgian border, 30th Corps had to drive through Eindhoven, Veghel, Grave, and Nijmegen, and then continue toward Arnhem. Tanks, self-propelled guns, trucks, engineers, ambulances, fuel, ammunition, and follow-on infantry all had to move on the same route. Later, that corridor would become known as Hell's Highway, and the name fit. In many places, the road ran through exposed terrain with ditches and soft ground on either side. There was little room to maneuver. If one vehicle was knocked out, traffic could back up behind it. If a bridge was destroyed, the timetable could begin to collapse. If German counterattacks cut the road even briefly, the entire operation felt the effect. That was one of the deepest weaknesses in the plan. Market Garden did not just depend on taking bridges. It depended on keeping one narrow artery open under constant pressure. That made the whole offensive far more fragile than it looked on a planning map. Despite all the risks, the opening phase on September 17th looked promising. The weather was favorable. Allied air power dominated the sky. The first landings were carried out on a huge scale and, at first glance, with impressive efficiency. The 101st Airborne landed in the south and moved on bridges near Eindhoven, Soon, Veghel, and nearby objectives. The 82nd Airborne landed around Grave and Grosbeek, where it secured key high ground and moved toward the crucial bridge at Nijmegen. The British 1st Airborne Division landed west of Arnhem, with orders to advance on the bridge over the Lower Rhine. And here, one of the key decisions of the battle becomes important. The British were not dropped directly on the bridge. Their landing zones were several miles west of the objective, around places such as Renkum, Heelsum, and Wolfheze. In planning, that seemed safer and more manageable. But in battle, those extra miles cost time. Troops had to assemble. They had to move through roads, woods, and built-up terrain. And every hour spent doing that gave the Germans more time to react. At Arnhem, those lost hours would matter enormously. The first day did produce real successes. The 82nd Airborne captured the long bridge at Grave intact, a major achievement. The 101st Airborne secured several key positions in the southern sector. In the Arnhem area, advance elements under Lieutenant Colonel John Frost did manage to push toward the bridge. At this point, the operation still looked alive. And that matters, because Market Garden was not doomed from the first minute. It did create opportunities. It did achieve surprise in places. And parts of the plan really did work. That is one reason the operation remains so debated. It came close enough to success to feel plausible, but it was also vulnerable enough to come apart quickly once pressure built. At the same time, warning signs were already appearing. At Sun, the road bridge was destroyed before the 101st could secure it, forcing engineers to bring up a replacement bridge and slowing the ground advance. Near Arnhem, only part of the British force got through quickly. Other battalions ran into delay, confusion, and rising German resistance. And then there was the communications problem. British radio performance near Arnhem became one of the most damaging technical weaknesses of the battle. Sets often had poor range or unreliable reception. Units lost contact. Commanders struggled to build a clear picture of events across a battlefield that was already beginning to fragment. This is how large operations often begin to fail. Not always with one spectacular disaster, but with a series of smaller failures that start to pile up. A bridge lost here, a battalion delayed there, a radio net failing at exactly the wrong time, a relief column slowed on the only road available. Each problem on its own might be manageable. Together, they begin to change the whole character of the campaign. The Germans were shocked by the scale of the attack, but they were not paralyzed. That point is crucial. Market Garden depended on the hope that German forces in the Netherlands were too disorganized to react quickly enough. In some areas, that seemed partly true, but in others, especially around Arnhem, it proved too optimistic. Field Marshal Walter Model, commander of Army Group B, happened to be in the region when the operation began. German commanders improvised fast. Kampfgruppen were formed. SS elements were redirected. Bridges were defended. Local attacks were organized with enough speed to disrupt the Allied timetable. The Germans did not need a perfect response to stop Market Garden. They only needed to recover quickly enough to slow it. And that is exactly what happened. By the end of the opening phase, the shape of the battle was already becoming clear. The Allies had made real gains in the south. Several important objectives had been secured, and 30th Corps was moving north. But the deeper problem was already visible. The entire advance depended on the road later remembered as Hell's Highway. Every delay along that corridor increased the danger farther north. Every lost hour on the road became more pressure at Arnhem. And at Arnhem, pressure was already building fast. Only part of the British force had reached the bridge. German resistance was stiffening. Radio communication was failing. And the final objective of the whole operation was beginning to turn from a coup de main into a siege. That is where the second part of the story begins. Because from this point on, Market Garden is no longer just a bold plan. It becomes a race between relief and collapse. Operation Market Garden opened with one of the most ambitious Allied ideas of the war. It was launched on September 17, 1944, with tens of thousands of airborne troops, hundreds of aircraft and gliders, and the belief that one fast blow through the Netherlands might break open the campaign in the West. But from the very first day, the operation revealed its true nature. It was not only bold, it was brittle. And in the next chapter, that brittleness will be tested at Arnhem, where courage, delay, and battlefield reality collided in one of the most famous battles of the Western Front.